Hello ladies. I am looking at my little schedule book here and finding out the things I need to do today, which I listed yesterday, and included our correspondence and calls. So today I would like to discuss a little bit about conversation and politeness and courtesy. You know, the Bible says to be kind-hearted, tender-hearted, loving one another, and forgiving, and also that we should be courteous. So keeping these principles in mind, I want to talk to you about the telephone. You know, we used to buy these, I don't know if they do that anymore. We used to buy these for our children because it was so much fun to pretend to talk to them. We played with them, we'd say hello, they'd say hello. We would ask a question, they would answer, we would say goodbye. But today we have special problems concerning conversation, and the telephone is probably due to text and email and the other things that fly so quickly into the air and we don't even think about it. But today I'd like to talk about speaking, on the telephone. And I owe a great debt to my friend Dahlia, which I hope she doesn't mind me mentioning her name, but she came to see me a couple weeks ago. I do appreciate your visits, everyone, when you're able to come over. I just so appreciate it, and I appreciate your telephone calls and your donations and the things that help me make these house dresses. And I just wanted to talk today about the telephone because my friend Dahlia said when her daughters were older and they got their computers and cell phones, she said, I'm not going to email you, and I am not going to text you. I'm not going to get on Facebook with you. If I want to talk to you, I will phone you, because everything I need to know, I will hear in your voice. Isn't that the truth? The Bible says, how shall they hear without a preacher? Why didn't God just say, well, here's the Bible, read the text? No, he sent preachers, and he commanded that the word be preached. And so we have preachers today. I'm married to one of them, and I'm starting to understand a lot more about it because I can read the text and be moved somewhat, but when a preacher preaches a lesson, it touches my heart. The inflection in his voice, and it all matters, and it moves people, it encourages them, it moves them to a certain action. Now, when I call you or you call me, you're going to hear the inflection in my voice. You're going to hear whether I am drowning in sorrow, or I'm happy, or I'm inspired. And I'm going to be inspired by what you say, and you're going to share an idea with me, and I'm going to say, that's a wonderful idea. Go with that, and I want to see that. Send me a picture. And so we can use, our electronic media for various things, but the telephone is so important because I want to hear your voice. And you even can remember probably your grandparents sitting there, and they had the telephone with the cord on it, and somebody would phone them. It would be a sister or a brother in another state, and the grandmother usually took the call and would talk for a while, and when she said goodbye, the grandfather would say, well, how did your sister sound? Now listen to that. Sound. How did she sound? And Grandma would say, oh, she sounded a bit down, her husband's been gone a couple of months now, and she's sounding a bit down. Or he would say, how did your son sound? How did our son sound? And she would say, he sounded really excited about his newest venture. So the sound is so important, and I want to hear it. I want to hear your voice, and that's why I make arrangements. We call each other and talk to each other. And that's why I'm doing videos too, because I think that hearing is so important. And even throughout the Bible, the Old Testament and the New Testament, we see Samuel. He heard God speak to him, and he said, Samuel, Samuel. And he said, here am I, Lord. And he thought Eli was talking to him. But so many times you hear the voice being used in the Bible. Of course, letters were written. You read about Ezra and Nehemiah and these letters that were written. Some of them not very nice, So I wanted to just encourage you to understand why some people would rather have a telephone call or a visit because it's personal. You can hear expression in the voice. You can even hear a smile in the voice. You can hear whether a person's just breaking up and ready to die over some disappointment or emotional problem. And remember that the Bible says to be kind and tender-hearted, loving one another, forgiving one another, and to weep with those who weep, and to rejoice with those who rejoice. And although we can get a lot out of letters and emails and texts, there's a danger in it sometimes, in that you can fly off the handle and it be not so nice, and it can be passed around. And of course you can do that on the phone too, but in my opinion, you're less likely when you're facing someone. You can empathize. There's empathy and sympathy going on in the voice contact. And the other thing that I wanted to bring up to you is that we are in the hang-up generation. And that's the hang-up culture. And that means if they don't like what you say, or they don't want to answer a question, or they don't want to talk to you anymore, and they want to hurt you, they hang up on you. And I remember, now you're probably all used to it, but I'm older, and I remember before the hang-up culture began, the first time my husband or I were hung up on, and how devastating it was. Just cut us, just felt like we'd been stabbed. We quickly tried to call back. Unfortunately, that was taken as harassment and meanness, and instilling fear. And then so afterwards, we did not. We're Christians, and we don't believe in going to sleep with when someone's upset with us or someone's mad at us. We want to straighten it out. We want to make everybody, we want to get along. So we unfortunately would visit people who had hung up on us, and which made them even more hostile. So I'm just wondering how to speak so that people won't hang up on you. But today we have a very volatile culture, and they will hang up at the slightest little inconvenience, the slightest little thing. And I'm happy to say that my husband and I have never hung up on anyone who was wanting to talk to us. Sometimes we felt that they were wanting us to, saying things to us that made us, that would want to tempt us to hang up, but we would always be patient and never be the first one to hang up. We always let them say goodbye. And here's another rule of the telephone. The one who does the phoning is usually the one who says goodbye. Now that there are exceptions to that. If you're phoning someone who is busy, they'll say, I'm expecting someone at the door, or I'm expecting a call. If I say goodbye suddenly, please don't take it as anything wrong. And so I just want to encourage you about the telephone and the voice, how important it is to call, especially the parents and grandparents and the children, on all this multi-generational thing. You know, the world wants to bust that up. They don't want you to have any multi-generational contact. They want your children and grandchildren to cut off. It's called the cut-off culture. They want it all cut off. And they don't think the world in general does not have that happy relationship, and they don't want anybody else to have it either. But I just want to say, please phone your relatives and have a short talk with them. And it doesn't have to be anything too deep. It can be, hello, I just want to hear your voice, just checking on you. What are you having for lunch today? What are you doing? What are you planning on doing? Where are you going? And yes, you could do this to anyone, but to do it to a relative bonds. The voice bonds. I know when I used to call my mother, her voice, it went way back to childhood, and there's a wonderful bonding there. And those of you who have experienced this will understand what I mean. So until I talk to you again, I hope to come back and talk a little bit more to the older women about their speech, particularly, I'll just tell you right now, cutting off someone. And I'm not talking about telephone speech. I'm just talking about the lack of courtesy when you're telling somebody something and they suddenly say, well, you already told me that, you don't have to tell me that again, wham. And you start to, maybe you're saying something that they already know, but you need to repeat it because it applies to something that you're going to say. And people need to I forget there's a term for that. It's an association term. And that is perfectly legitimate to repeat a little anecdote or an example in order to set up another scenario or story or something you want to tell, but people are very quick to cut you off if they've